I paid for my parents' $4,000 anniversary dinner, then exposed my mom for stealing $80,000 from me. Hi, I'm Luca, 36, and last month I found out my own mother had been stealing from me for over a year, during her anniversary dinner that I paid for. They were already done eating when I walked in. My mother beamed. "Oh, you're late. Cover the bill, will you?" My sister laughed, completely unbothered, swirling the last inch of red wine in her glass like I was the help, not the son who'd organized the entire night. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, is that I had every receipt. Every timestamp. Every stolen charge logged and highlighted, waiting quietly inside a manila folder in my messenger bag. It had started small, and I almost missed it. A couple Uber Eats charges I didn't remember. A Nordstrom purchase that sounded familiar, but not familiar enough. I'd chalked it up to fraud. Got the card replaced. Until it kept happening. Until a $7,800 charge to a luxury spa in Sedona popped up one morning while I was drinking instant coffee in my 2-bedroom apartment, where I was living because I'd loaned my parents $20,000 the year before to keep them out of foreclosure. That's when I hired the forensic accountant. And a lawyer. And decided to wait. Wait for the next time they asked for something. Wait for the next special occasion that came with strings. Wait until I could watch them look me in the eyes and ask for more after stealing thousands behind my back. That occasion came fast, their 40th anniversary. Meridian was their dream restaurant. Private dining room. Award-winning duck confit. Waiters in tuxedos. The kind of place where the cheapest bottle of wine is $400 and the valet guy probably makes more in tips than I do in a week. But I made the reservation. Used my mom's stolen card to hold it. Petty? Maybe. Illegal? Possibly. But I wanted one thing, clarity. So when I arrived 30 minutes late because of a traffic jam on I-80, stepped into that beautiful candlelit dining room I'd rented, and saw 4 empty plates, 4 empty wine bottles, and no place set for me, something in me shifted. The manager came over with the bill, $4, $2.73, and confirmed, loudly enough for the entire table to hear, that the card on file was Brenda Richardson's. My mother. Her smile froze. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice wobbling. "There's no mistake," I said calmly. "Just a long list of them I finally decided to stop making." Then I reached into my bag and slid the folder across the table. And watched the color drain from my mother's face. Diane grabbed the folder like it was going to bite her. She flipped through the first few pages, then hissed. "You went to the police?" I didn't flinch. "Identity theft is a felony, Diane. Credit card fraud, too. 18 months worth of unauthorized charges. $70,000 total. Every transaction traced. Every one of them tied to Mom's device ID, her IP address, her rewards accounts." My father, Robert, sat frozen, his napkin halfway to his mouth like someone had hit pause on the evening. "Luca," he finally said in that calm, father-knows-best tone I used to fall for. "Let's not blow this out of proportion. Family shares resources." I almost laughed. "That's not sharing," I said. "Sharing requires consent. This was theft." Brenda's voice turned shrill. "We're your parents. We gave you everything." I took a breath. "You gave me life." "Yes." "And a childhood full of financial anxiety and a sister who never had to face consequences for anything. I paid off your second mortgage at 27. I covered Diane's second DUI bail. I co-signed on Kevin's student loans, which he defaulted on 2 years later. So if we're keeping score..." I trailed off, letting the weight of it land. Kevin, my brother-in-law, looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes flicking toward the wine bottles like they might have an escape plan printed on the label. Brenda clutched the bill in her hand, staring at the total. "Well," she said weakly, "you're doing fine. You didn't even notice the money was gone until recently." That hit me harder than I expected. Not the theft. The entitlement. That assumption that because I'd finally gotten stable, my resources became communal property. "Exactly," I said. "I didn't notice right away because I was busy working 60-hour weeks, saving for a down payment. Living below my means." "Meanwhile, you were using my card for spa treatments and designer handbags." Robert finally spoke again, this time with heat. "You're really going to do this here? Now? In front of everyone?" I looked around the table. "There is no everyone," I said. "Just the 4 of you, who sat here, ate a $4,000 meal without me, and assumed I'd foot the bill like always. Diane scoffed. Oh, come on. You always pay. And that, I said, is exactly the problem. Daniel, the restaurant manager, cleared his throat behind me. Mr. Richardson, we do need to resolve the bill before the end of the evening. Brenda's voice trembled. Luca, just pay it, and we can talk about this later. I will, I said. Because I made the reservation. Because I gave my word. But this is the last thing I ever pay for on your behalf. And when I said it, I meant it. I handed Daniel a card. Not the card. Not the old one they'd memorized from birthday gifts and emergency transfers. No, this was a brand new Platinum Amex issued 2 weeks ago with a fraud alert stamped on the old account and a note in the system to decline all past users. Daniel glanced at it, his face unreadable, then stepped away to process the charge. My mother sat there stiff as stone, eyes flicking between the folder and the doorway like she might bolt if she could just find the right lie to crawl into. Diane wasn't so subtle. You're seriously going to throw away this family over money? She snapped. You know how bad Dad's business has been. You know Mom's been stressed. And I just had a baby, Luca. You think life's been easy for us? You had the seafood tower, I said flatly. It was $300. And Kevin doesn't even like shellfish. Kevin let out a tiny, unexpected chuckle, then quickly looked down at his plate like he regretted it. Oh, you think this is funny? Diane said, turning on him. You're laughing at my brother humiliating us in public? He didn't answer. Just rubbed the bridge of his nose like he was trying to erase the past 10 years of his life. I turned to Diane, not angry, just done. You want to talk about sacrifice? I had knee surgery last fall. Did you know that? She blinked. No. Exactly. Because I told Mom. 2 weeks before the operation. You know what she said? Nobody answered. She said, "That's nice, dear," and then asked if I could cover your car insurance again. I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't need to. They remembered now. The silence was deep enough to hear the tiny tick of the chandelier above us. I was high on painkillers and Ubering to post-op appointments. Alone. While you guys used my car to buy hotel nights in Tahoe and emergency dental work that somehow included a $900 whitening kit. Diane's voice cracked. You were supposed to care about us. I did, I said. Too much. For too long. I cared so much I stopped caring about myself. And you treated that like a blank check? Daniel returned and quietly set the receipt in front of me. Thank you for settling the account, Mr. Richardson. I nodded, signed, and set the pen down. This is the last thing I'll ever pay for. I looked at each of them. And the last dinner we'll ever have together. Diane's voice shot up like she was about to argue again, but she saw something in my face. Something final. And for once in her life, she stayed quiet. Nobody moved. It was like I dropped a live grenade in the middle of their duck confit and vintage Bordeaux, and now they were just waiting to see if it would actually explode. Brenda finally broke the silence, her voice soft and trembling. Luca, you're really cutting us off? Just like that? Not just like that, I said. It's been decades like that. This is me finally catching up. My dad leaned forward, his face flushed. You're being dramatic. You don't end a relationship with your mother over a few credit card charges. Few? I laughed, short and sharp. Do you know how much damage you did to my credit? Do you know what interest rate I had to take on my mortgage because of a defaulted card I didn't even know existed until my loan officer flagged it? Brenda flinched. So she remembered. Opened 4 years ago, I continued. In my name. Using my social. Maxed out. Then ignored. And when the collections agency called? You pretended you didn't know anything about it. That was a mistake. She whispered. I thought I could fix it before. You stole from me, I said. And then you lied about it. Kevin was staring at her now too, something dawning behind his eyes. Wait, what card? He asked. I thought Luca helped with the business loan. My dad let out a disgusted huff. This is what happens when you spoil kids. They turn into traitors the first time they get told no. I didn't get told no, I said, voice steady. I got robbed. For nearly 80 grand. And I would have forgiven all of it, every cent, if you'd just admitted it. If you'd shown the tiniest shred of remorse. My mom tried again. We didn't think you'd notice. You have so much. That's the part that kills me, I said. You thought having money meant I didn't deserve to own it. They didn't see it. Even now. Even after everything. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out the letter from my lawyer, Patricia Hawkins. Folded it neatly. Placed it in front of Brenda. She stared at it like it was a death certificate. What is this? A formal notice, I said. We're pursuing full restitution. Civil suits already filed. Criminal charges are next. You'll get contacted by the state investigator this week. Robert's chair screeched against the hardwood as he stood. You would do this to your own family? I stood too. No, I said. You did this. I'm just done pretending you didn't. Robert's face was the color of spoiled milk. You think a judge is going to side with you? He growled. After everything we did for you? After all the sacrifices? Brenda's lower lip trembled. You were our son. Still am, I said. But I'm not your personal bailout plan anymore. Not your retirement fund. Not your get-out-of-debt card. Just your son. And that's clearly never been enough for you. Kevin had gone quiet. Too quiet. He looked between the three of them, his wife, her parents, then leaned back in his chair with a slow, dawning expression that made the hair rise on my arms. Wait, he said. The card Diane gave me, the one she said was for emergencies. Diane's head whipped around. Kevin, not now. But he didn't stop. That was your card, wasn't it? He asked me. I tilted my head. Which one? He described it. The old green Visa. The one I canceled a year ago. Yep, I said. That one got used for an Airbnb in Napa. Twice. A down payment on a Peloton. And a vet bill, for a dog I've never met. Kevin looked like he'd been punched. I thought she said it was a backup from your shared account. We never had a shared account, I said. She just had the number. Same way Mom did. Same way Dad probably did too. I didn't. Robert started, but I cut him off. Don't even try it. There were charges from your golf club logged under my name. Monthly. Same day every month. For almost a year. I thought you were helping. Brenda cried. You always said, let me know if you need anything. Yeah, I said. I meant emotional support. Maybe help moving a couch. Not feel free to open a credit line in my name and burn my financial future to the ground. Diane finally snapped. Jesus, Luca, you're such a martyr. You want a parade because you didn't end up broke like the rest of us? You're acting like a victim when you're sitting on a six-figure salary. You're right, I said. I am sitting on a six-figure salary. Want to know how? I worked. I skipped vacations. I didn't buy a new car every time the check engine light came on. I stayed in a job I hated for 7 years because it had a 401k. I budgeted. I sacrificed. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, okay. You're a hero. Gold star. No, I said. I'm just someone who finally learned that letting people walk all over you doesn't make you generous. It makes you a doormat. Kevin exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 3 years straight. I need to call my babysitter, he muttered, standing up. Diane grabbed his wrist. Sit down. But he didn't. He looked at her, really looked at her, and then looked at me. You good? He asked. For the first time in a long time, I said. He gave me a small nod and walked out. Diane looked like she might implode. I hope you're happy. No, I said. But I am free. Diane shoved her chair back so hard it rattled the entire table. I can't believe this. You're destroying our family over a stupid dinner bill and a couple credit cards. That dinner bill was $4,000, I said, and those couple credit cards add up to almost 80 grand in theft. You keep saying theft like we're strangers who broke into your house. You didn't have to break in, I said. You had a key. That's what makes it worse. Brenda had gone quiet, her eyes fixed on the letter from my attorney like if she stared hard enough, it would just disappear. But my father, always the last one to give up a power struggle, decided to take one last shot. You think you're better than us now, he said, voice low and bitter. Sitting there in your tailored suit, waving lawyers around. You forget where you came from, Luca. I took a slow breath. No, Dad. I remember exactly where I came from. I remember growing up with overdraft notices taped to the fridge. I remember Mom crying over collection calls while you stormed around blaming everyone else. I remember Diane getting a car for her 17th birthday, and me getting a lecture about how money doesn't grow on trees. I remember working 2 jobs in college while you borrowed my financial aid check to pay off casino debt. Robert's jaw clenched. You have no idea what we were dealing with. You're right, I said. Because you never told me. You just took. And took. And took. Until I was too afraid to check my bank statements, because I didn't know which charges were mine anymore. Brenda finally looked up, her voice small. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But it did, I said. And the worst part is, if you'd come to me and admitted it, before I hired a forensic accountant, before I involved the police, I might have forgiven you. But you didn't. You doubled down. You used the card after I told you it was closed. You just moved to a different one. Diane scoffed. So what's the endgame here, Luca? You press charges? Mom gets arrested? Dad's name in the paper? You think that's going to make you feel better? I'm not doing this to feel better, I said. I'm doing this because I finally understand that protecting myself isn't betrayal. It's survival. Brenda tried one more time, desperate now. We're your parents, she whispered. That should count for something. I nodded slowly. It did. For a long time. But if love isn't mutual, if respect isn't real, then biology isn't enough to excuse what you've done. The door cracked open again. Daniel stepped back in. Mr. Richardson, your payment has been processed. Thank you. I stood up. Adjusted my jacket. Looked down at the people who raised me, lied to me, and used me. I hope you enjoyed the meal, I said. Then I walked out and left the room that smelled like betrayal, red wine, and duck fat. Outside, the valet handed me my keys like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just dropped a legal nuke into the middle of my family and walked away while the fallout cloud formed over creme brulee. I sat in my car for a minute, hands on the wheel, engine running, heart racing. I half expected the guilt to hit me. The tight-chested regret that always came after I stood up for myself. That familiar cocktail of shame and second-guessing I'd been trained to swallow since I was old enough to recognize disappointment in my father's voice. But it didn't come. What came instead was silence. Not awkward silence. Not empty silence. Clean silence. The kind that comes when the air clears after a storm, when the yelling finally stops and you realize you survived. I drove home with no music. No phone calls. Just the glow of city lights sliding across my windshield, and the feeling in my gut that something massive had just ended, or maybe started. I got back to my place, walked inside, and saw the envelope still sitting on my kitchen counter, the one I'd written weeks earlier, sealed with a copy of the forensic accountant's full report, the letter from my attorney, and a personal note. You still have a choice. Come clean now, and maybe we can find a way forward. But keep lying, and I'll burn it all down. I'd never mailed it. They made the choice for me. That weekend, Patricia, my attorney, filed both the civil suit and the criminal complaint. Fraud, identity theft, and restitution. The police contacted my mom within days. She cried. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Played the victim so well I half expected an Oscar nomination. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the timestamps. She eventually took a plea deal. No jail time, probation, community service, full repayment. I didn't go to the hearing. Diane sent me a message a few months later, one long guilt-drenched email about how I'd ruined the family. How money isn't worth destroying relationships over. How I should have handled it privately. I read it. Once. Then I archived it. Because I wasn't interested in fixing a family that only functioned when I stayed broken. Daniel, the restaurant manager, texted me a few weeks after the dinner. Can't stop thinking about that night. You okay? We met up. Talked. Laughed. He didn't flinch when I told him the whole story, front to back. Didn't judge. Just listened. And when I said, I think I need to learn what healthy people look like, he just smiled and said, I've got a few ideas. We started seeing each other. Turns out, there are people who want you for you, not your wallet. And for the first time in my life, I started to believe I deserved them. The final restitution payment hit my account exactly 2 years after that dinner. $312.46. Brenda's last monthly installment, transferred automatically from an account I hoped was now being overseen by someone with a lockbox and a conscience. I didn't keep the money. Like every other payment before it, It went straight into the financial literacy nonprofit fund I'd set up. A small, quiet tribute to the version of me who didn't know better. Who kept paying. Who kept excusing. Who thought love was earned through overdraft fees and emotional CPR. That guy deserved better. So did a lot of other people like him. I closed the account after the last transfer and let the moment wash over me. Not a celebration. Not even relief. Just a quiet ending. One chapter finally closed with a clean line instead of a blood smear. Diane never reached out again. Not after the email I didn't answer. Not after her husband filed for divorce 6 months later, citing financial deception and emotional neglect. She blamed me, of course. Told mutual acquaintances I'd poisoned him. But Kevin and I both knew the truth. He'd simply stopped making excuses once he saw what those patterns looked like from the outside. Robert stayed silent after the initial outburst. No legal response, no apology, no last-ditch effort to reassert control. Just nothing. Which, in its own way, was an answer. And a gift. I thought the grief would linger. It didn't. Not in the way I expected. What I mourned wasn't the family I lost. It was the one I'd never had in the first place. The fantasy. The Christmas card illusion of people who show up, who remember birthdays, who ask how your surgery went without angling for a check. That family never existed. I just played my part so well, I convinced myself they might one day become real. But they didn't. What came instead, after the anger, after the heartbreak, was a kind of peace that doesn't ask for applause. The kind that doesn't even raise its voice. It just is. I grew tomatoes. I learned to bake. I rewatched old movies without flinching when the happy family scenes came on. I took my nephew, Diane's son, to a baseball game once, quietly, without telling anyone. He's innocent in all this. And I figured someone should show him what kindness without a transaction looks like. And Daniel? He stuck around. Never once asked about money. Never once made me feel like a ledger. Just showed up. Day after day. Laughing, cooking, sitting next to me on the couch with a kind of love that felt so unfamiliar. I didn't trust it at first. But eventually I did. Eventually I let it in. Because I wasn't afraid of boundaries anymore. I wasn't afraid of walking away. I'd already done it once, and it turned out, it was the best decision I ever made. Daniel proposed on a Tuesday. Not some big spectacle. No violin quartets or flash mobs. Just us, in the garden, dirt on my jeans, tomato leaves in my hair, a little silver ring glinting in the evening sun like it had been waiting quietly for its cue. He knelt between the raised beds and said, "I love you. Not for what you can fix, or fund, or carry. Just for being you." I said yes with tears in my eyes and soil under my nails, because that felt more honest than any diamond in a box ever could. We got married 6 months later, small ceremony, no drama, no registry. Just a few close friends who knew the whole story and still chose to show up, not because they wanted anything, but because they wanted us. No one from my family was invited. Not because I was angry. Not anymore. But because absence was the most honest RSVP they'd earned. That decision shocked some people. The old family friends, the second cousins who showed up late to every reunion and left early with a Tupperware full of potato salad, they sent messages. How could you exclude your parents? They raised you. Doesn't that count for something? And I always answered the same way. Yes. It counted. Until they decided I existed for what I could give, not who I was. I wasn't mad. I was done. My therapist called it grief with clarity. The kind of loss that doesn't need to be stitched back together because it was never whole to begin with. Sometimes I miss them. But not the real them, the people who drained my accounts, my patience, my sense of worth. I miss the imaginary version. The one I created in my head. The warm, supportive, non-existent parents who never once actually shown up the way I needed them to. Daniel met them once, by the way. At Meridian. That night. He was just a manager back then, professionally quiet, tablet in hand, watching it all unfold. I remember your face when you walked in. He told me one night, curled up beside me. You looked like a man who already knew. Who just hoped he was wrong. I did know. I just needed to see it one more time. And I'm glad I did. Because after that, I stopped hoping they'd change. And I started changing me. The last automatic transfer from Brenda's account came with no note. No apology. No attempt to reach out. Just the cold efficiency of a bank process running its course. $312.46. Final payment complete. I watched the balance hit my account, let the notification sit on my phone screen for a few seconds, and then transferred the money straight into the donation fund like always. Then I closed the restitution account for good. That chapter? Fully closed. The rest of my life? Wide open. In the months after the wedding, things shifted more than I expected. It's funny, once you stop bleeding out emotionally and financially into toxic family systems, you realize just how much energy you have. How much space. Daniel and I started traveling. Nothing crazy, just weekend road trips, new cities, long hikes, meals that weren't tied to guilt or obligation. We got a dog. A clumsy, oversized shepherd mix named Beans who loved everyone and didn't understand boundaries, but in the good way. I got promoted again. COO turned CEO when the board voted in July. The vote was unanimous. It hit me as I sat at the head of that long glass table in a suit I'd actually had tailored this time. There's no one left to steal this from me. No one waiting at the edges of success, hand out. No one undermining me with whispers of selfishness for keeping what I earned. No one minimizing the cost of what it took to build this life. Except for the occasional text. Diane still sends them. Every few months like clockwork. The last one said, "Dad's getting worse. I'm doing the best I can, but I can't do this alone. You could at least ask how we're doing." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care that my father's health was declining. I did. In a detached, almost anthropological way. Like hearing about a storm in a town you once lived in. But I knew what the subtext was. Come back. Be useful again. Be responsible for us again. No one ever asks how I'm doing. Not once. Not in all the months since the restaurant. But Daniel does. My friends do. My team at work does. And maybe that's what makes it so clear. I'm not the one who left the family. I'm the one who finally stopped confusing obligation with love. A year after the final payment, I got a letter. Real paper, hand-addressed, no return name, just a familiar zip code in the corner. I almost didn't open it. Almost threw it straight into the shred pile with the rest of the unsolicited mail. But something in the handwriting stopped me. Inside was one page, written in my mother's unmistakable script. Luca. I know you probably won't read this. But I wanted to try anyway. Your father is getting worse. He doesn't remember things. Sometimes not even me. We don't talk about you much, but I think on some level, he still misses you. I miss you too. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong. I just thought you could afford it. That it didn't really matter. That if I gave enough back in other ways, holidays, birthdays, meals, I was still being a mother. I see now that I wasn't. That I traded your trust for convenience. That I raised you to solve our problems instead of ever solving yours. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did. And I'm sorry. Mom. I read it 3 times. Sat with it for a full hour, the dog curled at my feet, Daniel in the kitchen humming off-key while he made tea. Then I folded the letter up, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath tax documents and warranty cards. Not to forget it. Not to pretend it didn't happen. But because some things don't require a response. Some things are just better as quiet acknowledgments of what could have been, but wasn't. Daniel came into the room holding 2 mugs, sat next to me on the couch, and handed me one. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. Just got a letter from my mom. He paused, watching me carefully. You want to talk about it? No, I said. I think I just want to be here. With you. In the life I actually chose. And he got it. Didn't push. Didn't try to fix it. Just handed me a cookie and turned on a bad documentary about cults. And in that moment, I felt more seen, more safe, more loved than I had in 3 decades of family birthdays and guilt-laced holidays. Sometimes healing doesn't come with a climax. Sometimes it just stays. And becomes the new normal. The letter stayed in the drawer. I didn't scan it, didn't show it to Daniel, didn't analyze the apology line by line like I used to do with their excuses. I just let it live there, between the practical remnants of my adult life, where it belonged. A relic. Not a door. And maybe that's growth. Because a year earlier, I would have picked it apart. Wondered if it was genuine. Let guilt creep back in like a draft under a locked window. Replayed every line to friends until the meaning twisted into obligation again. But not now. Now, I had bigger things to focus on. Daniel and I bought a house outside the city. Nothing flashy. But it had a wide porch, old trees, and a garden plot ready for planting. The backyard had space for beings to sprint in joyful, clumsy laps. We moved in on a warm spring day with the windows down and music playing loud. No drama. No one asking when the movers would be paid. No parent calling to remind me that you owe us for everything. Just joy. Clean earned joy. I planted tomatoes the first weekend. Same variety I tried to grow the year before. This time, they actually took. Daniel caught me standing out there one evening, hands on my hips, staring at the little green sprouts with the kind of pride most people reserve for diplomas or wedding photos. He walked up beside me, leaned in close, and said, "It's nice watching you build things that don't get taken away." I didn't even answer. Just smiled. Because he was right. That was the new rule. No more pouring into people who see your value only in what you give. No more funding loyalty from those who never earned it. No more confusing familiarity with love. And it wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I still missed the idea of a family, sometimes. I still felt that old ache when I saw moms hugging grown sons in airports, or siblings laughing over inside jokes I'd never have with mine again. But I also knew this. I would never again pay $4,273 to be reminded of my place in someone else's hierarchy. Now, I set the table for people who actually saw me. And the meals we shared? They never came with a bill. 3 years after the dinner at Meridian, I got another unexpected message. Not a letter this time. An email. From Kevin. Subject line, "Just wanted to say thank you." I stared at it for a while, unsure if I should open it. He and I hadn't spoken since the night he walked out of the Rosewood room and never looked back. No contact, no follow-up. I figured he was doing what I did, rebuilding in silence. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hey Luca. I don't know if this is weird or out of bounds, but I just wanted to thank you. Truly. That night at the restaurant, it cracked something open for me. I knew things with Diane weren't healthy. I just didn't realize how deep the rot went until I saw what it looked like on the outside. We finalized the divorce last month. I'm living in a smaller place now, but for the first time in years, the bills are mine and mine alone. No secrets. No sudden debts I didn't agree to. Just peace. A weird, quiet, beautiful kind of peace. You didn't just blow up your own dynamic that night, you gave me the nerve to walk away from mine. I didn't realize how much I needed that until you said the words out loud. Anyway, I hope life's been good to you. And if you ever want to grab a beer, it's on me this time. Kevin. I didn't cry. But I sat there a long time, just breathing. Feeling. Letting that email settle into the space where the rage used to live. Because this was the part no one talks about. That when you start setting boundaries, when you draw the line and really mean it, people don't just walk away. Some of them? They wake up. And when they do, they start saving themselves too. I never responded. Not because I didn't appreciate the message. I did. Deeply. But I think some moments are meant to be complete in themselves. He said what he needed to say. I heard it. And that was enough. Daniel read the email over my shoulder. That guy was married to Diane? Yep. He sipped his coffee. Man. That must have been exhausting. It was, I said. For both of us. He nudged me with his elbow. You think he'd want to join our trivia team? I laughed. You just want someone else who knows all the obscure 80s movies. Maybe, he said. But mostly I just like being around people who understand what peace looks like. And I realized right then, that's what I'd built. Not just a house. Not just a relationship. A life filled with people who knew how to sit quietly in the truth. Even when it hurt. Even when it changed everything. Especially then. The garden surprised me. I used to kill every plant I touched. Overwatered succulents. Forgot to rotate potted herbs. Once murdered a basil bush in 3 days flat. But now the tomatoes were thriving. So were the peppers. And the kale I never actually liked but kept planting anyway, just because it felt like a sign of stability. Daniel joked that I'd finally developed brute energy. Like I'd stopped just surviving and actually settled into my life. Like things could grow around me without being immediately uprooted by someone else's crisis. He wasn't wrong. I kept the life I'd built simple. Intentional. Weekly phone calls with friends who didn't need anything from me except time. Long walks with beans. Early mornings where I made real breakfast instead of grabbing something on the way out of the door. Every once in a while, someone from the old world would pop up. A cousin trying to reconnect. An uncle testing the waters, an old family friend who just wanted to hear your voice again. I never got angry. I just smiled, said no, and moved on. That's what happens when people see you differently than you see yourself, when they mistake your capacity for weakness. They keep testing the fence, hoping it's not really there. But mine? It was steel now. Then, one morning in late September, I got a call from my lawyer. "Luca," she said, her voice even. "You're going to be contacted by Brenda's executor. I just wanted to give you a heads up." Executor. The word dropped like a stone in my gut. "She's gone?" Patricia hesitated. 2 days ago. Stroke. Sudden. I didn't speak for a long moment. Not because I didn't know what I felt, but because I knew exactly what I felt. And it wasn't grief. It was a strange, unfamiliar mix of acceptance and finality. Like the last chapter in a book you stopped reading years ago had finally been written without your permission. "There's a letter," Patricia added. "Filed with her will. Marked for you. Is it legally necessary?" "No. Purely personal. You can ignore it." I paused. "Send it over." "But I'm not opening it yet. That letter sits in my safe. Still sealed. Because I already know what it says. And I already know it doesn't change anything. Sometimes people die with the same silence they lived with. And sometimes that's the most honest ending you can get. The envelope sat in the safe for 3 weeks. I didn't forget about it. I just didn't need it. Didn't feel the itch to read her final version of the story, because I already knew mine. And for the first time in my life, my version was the only one that mattered. Daniel asked about it once. "You ever gonna open it?" "Maybe," I said. "But probably not." He nodded, no judgment in his face. Just that steady, grounding presence that had slowly become my version of home. "I'll be here either way." We went back to watching a bad cooking competition show where someone tried to flambe shrimp with a blowtorch and nearly set their station on fire. Life had gotten weirdly peaceful like that. Not perfect, still bills to pay, still hard days at work, still old wounds that flared up in quiet moments, but peaceful. And one morning, while I was trimming back the basil that refused to die, I realized something. I hadn't thought about Meridian in months. Not the meal. Not the folder. Not the moment when Daniel read off the credit card number, and the entire room froze like a bad stage play. I hadn't relived it. Hadn't needed to. Because that night wasn't the explosion I used to think it was the evacuation. The night I finally got out of a building already on fire. The rest? Was just smoke clearing. I took the sealed letter from the safe and walked it straight to the shredder. No drama. No ceremony. If her last words were meant to rewrite the past, they didn't deserve space in my present. Daniel came home that night with grocery bags, saw the shredder bin full, and raised an eyebrow. "Clean sweep?" "Something like that," I said. He pulled out a pint of overpriced ice cream and tossed it to me. "Then it's a good night." We sat on the porch, spooning Rocky Road straight from the container, while Beans snored like a chainsaw at our feet. I looked out over the garden, green, messy, thriving, and thought, this is it. The real inheritance. Not the money. Not the letters. Not the guilt. Just this. Peace I didn't have to pay for. Love that didn't come with a receipt. And roots, deep, untouchable, finally mine. Late one Sunday afternoon, Daniel found me in the garden, crouched next to a patch of sunflowers that had grown almost obscenely tall. He leaned against the fence, arms folded. "There's a voicemail from your dad." I didn't look up. "Yeah?" He nodded. "From the number Patricia flagged last year." Robert hadn't called in over a year. After Brenda died, he vanished even further from my periphery. No contact, no legal pushback, no surprise visits. Just gone. Like someone had unplugged the character and left a placeholder where a father used to be. "What did he say?" Daniel pulled his phone out, replayed the message. Robert's voice crackled through the speaker, older, smaller, and somehow more hollow than I remembered. "Luca. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I guess. About a lot of things. I know it doesn't matter. I've been thinking. About the way things ended. About you. Anyway. I'm in town. Won't be back this way again." If you want to talk, I'll be at Leighton Motel. Room 14. Until Monday morning. That's all. He hung up after that. No demands. No requests. Not even a goodbye. Daniel put the phone down. You want to go? I stood slowly, brushing dirt off my knees. No. It wasn't an angry no. It wasn't bitter. It just was. Because what I'd realized over the last few years was this: some endings don't come with final conversations or dramatic reconciliations. Sometimes they come quietly, through not going, through not responding, through letting things stay exactly where they fell. I wasn't who I was back then. Not the guy who'd show up because it felt like the right thing to do. Not the son who needed closure handed to him like an overdue apology. I didn't need anything from Robert anymore, not his regret, not his approval, not even his understanding. That part of the story was over. Daniel nodded like he'd already known my answer. He walked over and kissed the top of my head. Come inside when you're ready. I've got dinner started. Let me guess, I said, smiling. Kale. Obviously. You planted way too much. He headed in, beans bounding after him, and I sat back down in the soil, letting the late sun warm my back. Somewhere, not far, my father was probably staring at a motel TV, wondering if I'd show up. But I didn't. Because healing doesn't always mean circling back. Sometimes it just means continuing forward, knowing the road behind you finally has no claim on where you're going next. A month after the voicemail, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a check for $5,000, made out to me, signed by Robert Richardson. And a note. Just one sentence in familiar blocky handwriting. Figured I owed you something before I forget everything. I stared at it for a long time. Not because of the money, honestly, I didn't need it. But because it was the first time in my entire adult life my father had written me a check instead of asking for one. I didn't cash it. I didn't shred it either. I tucked it into the same drawer where my mom's letter had once lived. Not out of sentimentality. Out of record-keeping. A marker of some kind. Proof, maybe, that even the most stubborn people sometimes glimpse the edge of the damage they've caused, before they disappear behind it. That was the last I ever heard from him. Word came 6 months later, secondhand, through a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Early onset dementia. Moved into a care facility upstate. Didn't recognize Diane when she visited. Called her the redhead, but she wasn't. I sent a sympathy card. Not to him. To the nurse. Because I figured she was the only one really caring for him now. That chapter was officially over. The family I was born into? Gone. Not through tragedy. Through choices. Mine, theirs, all of ours. What was left were fragments, voicemail files I never replayed, paper trails of regret, a couple of old photos I kept in a box not because I missed the people in them, but because they reminded me how far I'd come. Because now, I was building something new. Daniel and I were planning a trip to Scotland. The kind of trip I used to say no to. Too expensive. Too indulgent. Too much guilt attached to the idea of spending money on myself when someone back home always needed saving. But now, there was no one left to drain the joy out of my life. No one waiting with a fresh emergency. No one making me prove my worth through sacrifice. Just me. Choosing. Every day. To live untangled. Scotland was quiet. Clean air, wide skies, soft rain that didn't ask for anything. I stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, Daniel's hand in mine, and realized this was what freedom felt like. Not escape. Arrival. I didn't need closure. Didn't need an apology. I'd built peace from the wreckage. And standing there, wind in my hair, no one calling, no one taking, I knew I was finally, completely free.